I would argue that there's no real difference between being dead and not living. And I want you to hold that thought for just a second. Now, the CDC tells us that heart disease takes more life every single year in America than any other ailment. But what if I told you that I might have discovered something that actually takes more life than heart disease? And the crazy thing about it is not too many people are aware of it. The way I came across this is I found some information from the Harris Group that reported that 2 out of 3 Americans are admitting that they're not very happy. And this didn't sit right with me. 2 out of 3 Americans. In a place where you can learn and grow and progress, where you can live where you want to live, where you can do what you want to do, where you can be whoever you want to be, 2 out of 3 of us are reporting that we're not very happy. I couldn't wrap my mind around this because we have a population of 320 million people, and 67% of that's a lot of people who are unhappy. So I built a little graphic. Now, this represents the US population. There are 320 figures, with each figure representing 1 million of us. So if this is the entire US population, then this would be the population who are admitting that they're not very happy. And again, this didn't sit right with me because of the opportunities that we have. So I thought, how? Why? What's causing this unhappiness? And so naturally, I looked at my own life. I looked at times when maybe I wasn't as happy as I could have been, or I should have been, really. And that's when I discovered this epidemic. This disease that I argue takes more life and stops us from living more than any other ailment we've ever seen. Now, before I tell you exactly what it is, I want to share with you kind of what it looks like. When I was 14, 15 years old, I was one of the youngest kids in high school. It was my first year of high school. I didn't have a car. I didn't have a driver's license. And I kept getting swirlies. All too often, they dip your head in the toilet and flush. I heard somebody go, "Aw, you got them too." I feel my pain. Now, jokes aside, 14, 15 years old, first year of high school, and I kept telling myself, I'll be happy when I'm a senior. Because when I'm a senior, I'm top dog of the school, I'll have a car, I'll be able to do what I want to do. Fingers crossed, swirlies will stop. And I kept telling myself I'll be happy when I become a senior. Well, my senior year came, and it wasn't everything I thought it was going to be, so I started telling myself, you know what, I'll be happy when I graduate. That's when I'll be happy. When I graduated, started working. That got really old really quick, and I started telling myself, man, I'll be happy when I get to college, because then that's when the fun starts. I can start to be my own person. Then I got to college, and I was stressed from exams and studying and having very little money, and I started telling myself, I'll be happy when I get into my career. And you very easily start to recognize this pattern of constantly saying, I will be happy when. And that's when I discovered this epidemic, this disease that stops us from living. It's something I call happy-whenitis. I'm not kidding. I've defined it as the subtle, aggressive lie we tell ourselves that we will be happy when some future event takes place. And the terrifying thing about happy-whenitis is that it actually doesn't explicitly make us unhappy. Happy-whenitis is not what makes you feel discontent. Matter of fact, happy-whenitis says, you know what? You can be happy. You will be happy. Just not right now. Happy-whenitis says the feeling of sadness, that feeling of anger, that feeling, again, of discontent, that's all justified, and it's okay that you feel that way. You should feel that way. Because happiness, it's in the future for you. The problem with putting our happiness off into the future is that the future never really gets here. So before we know it, we're 40, 50, 60 years old, having spent the last 30 years of our life saying, I will be happy when. And that's why I argue that this disease takes more life than any ailment we've ever seen. And if there is truly no difference between being dead and not living, then we have to do something about it. So that's the bad news. The good news is, I also think I might have found the cure. And it's 3 simple ingredients that if we employ, we can fight happy-winitis. And the reason why these are the 3 remedies is because every instance, every scenario, every problem that is tied back to happy-winitis can be traced back to one of these 3 things. And they are perspective, action, and relationships. So to finish, I want to talk about these 3 things quickly. And I want us to understand first, what are they? Second, why are they relevant? And third, how do they combat the disease? So first, perspective. And what I mean by perspective is the way we view the world. See, perspective is the lens by which we view life through. And much like my glasses, they're the proper prescription for me, so they allow me to see my life more clearly. If I have a proper perspective, if you have a proper perspective, it allows you to see life more clearly. And the reason why this is so relevant is because it keeps small problems small. And when we're faced with a big problem, perspective says, yes, acknowledge there's a big problem, but a proper perspective says, don't focus on the problem, focus on what's my next step. An unhealthy perspective says, I'll be happy when my significant other or my immediate family change. I'll be happy when my boss or my colleagues change. I'll be happy when, I'll be happy when I get that new marble countertop in my house. That's when I'll be happy. But a healthy perspective says, I'm happy I don't have to go through life alone. A healthy perspective says, I'm glad that I get to work with a diverse group of people that undoubtedly make me a better person. A healthy perspective says, that marble countertop, it will look nice in my house, but I'm just happy that I have a roof over my head every night I go to sleep. That's the first ingredient, the first step to combating happy-winitis. Second is action. And what I mean by action is working towards something of value for you. Or in the words of my mentor, he said, working towards something that's going to outlive you. And the reason why this is so important is because the Wall Street Journal just recently reported, and this is fantastic news, this is great news. Wall Street Journal said, job satisfaction is higher than it's been in a decade. Right now, job satisfaction has hit its peak in 10 years, which is great news. Until you hear that great news is 48%. Which means that over half of working Americans are unhappy with the way that they're spending over half of their day. I would argue that we are not working towards something of value for us. We're not working towards something that will outlive us. Because if we were, 52% of us wouldn't be dissatisfied with our job satisfaction. Now, how do we do that? How do we accomplish this? What will leave us satisfied? And Forbes magazine, they looked at all the factors of job satisfaction. They looked at pay, benefits, who your boss is, where you work, who you work with, and none of those were the number one factor of job satisfaction. The number one factor was simply interest in the work you're involved in. So it doesn't matter if you're a first responder or an educator or a stay-at-home mom or you work at a bakery. If you find interest in the work, that is working towards something of value for you. That's the second ingredient. Third, and finally, arguably the most important, are our relationships. Now, one of my favorite speaker authors, another small-town Idaho boy, the late Jim Rohn, he would argue that we're the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So when I say relationships, I don't mean just our significant others. I don't mean just our immediate family. I mean everybody around us, the people that influence us the most. And I happen to agree with Jim Rohn that we are the average of the people that we come in contact with the most. And the reason why this is so relevant is because we can't help but be affected by those who we invest in and who we allow to invest in us. I have this sign up in my classroom. I'm a high school teacher, and this is something I share with my students. You can't stay dry in a pool. It's a pretty obvious thought. And as it relates to relationships is you can't expect to jump into a pool and not get wet. So we can't expect that if we're always hanging around negative, angry, complaining people, that we're not going to be negative, angry complainers. And that's an idea that I share with my students, which is so obvious to us from the outside looking in, but if we're surrounded by it, sometimes it's hard to see. So, ladies and gentlemen, I don't share this idea with you just for the sake of sharing an idea. I share this idea with you because I believe that there is an epidemic, actually not just in our country, but in the world, and I do believe it takes more life away than any other ailment we've ever seen. And our first speaker, Stephen Hatch, he said, listen, we're always finding ourselves in a place of either fulfilling our needs, fulfilling our wants, or trying to leave a legacy. I honestly believe that if we ask ourselves, what perspective am I keeping? What action am I working towards? What relationships am I working on? We can very easily go from the first or second step to the third step of leaving a legacy. And if there truly is no difference between being dead and not living, what are you going to do about it?